All right, welcome everyone to today's program, Transitioning California and the World to 100% Clean, Renewable Energy and Storage for Everything. My name is Laurel Plimier, and I am the, I am the president of the League of Women Voters of Piedmont in California, and I want to thank everyone who is joining us today for taking time out of your day to be with us here on Zoom and on YouTube. Today's event is the final event in our 2022-2023 Climate Speaker Series, and it's brought to you by the League of Women Voters of Piedmont and Piedmont Connect, which is our local climate advocacy group. Today's event is also co-sponsored by the Leagues of Women Voters of Solano County in California and Portland in Oregon. And we have members from about 17 different local leagues representing California, Oregon, and Colorado joining us today. So thank you all for being here. Our previous programs in this series covered the topics of wildfires, textiles, groundwater management, health effects from heat, and electric vehicles. And you can find recordings of all of those events on our YouTube channel, and plus today's will also be there. And since this is the last event in our series, we will be taking a break here in our league after this event, and we'll return hopefully in the fall with new educational events. So before we get to the introduction of our guest speaker, I wanted to quickly go over a few logistics. If you're on the Zoom call with us, you can post your questions for our speaker now or at any time during the presentation using the Q&A feature. You can also introduce yourself. We'd love to have you introduce yourself in the chat. But if you leave your questions in the Q&A, we're more likely to see them there. If you are joining us on YouTube or watching the recording of this event there, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you click the bell, you'll get notifications of future live stream events. For advance notice of upcoming events, if you scan the QR code, which is behind me here, you can support us on Outreach Circle, where you'll get notifications of upcoming events, recordings of events, and election information, like when candidate forums are coming up and things like that. If you're looking to get more involved with us, there will be also opportunities like helping with Get Out the Vote campaigns, leading up to the 2024 election next year. And I'll post those links in chat too once we get started. You can also join our mailing list and become a member of the League of Women Voters of Piedmont on our website, which is lwvpiedmont.org. Typically in these events that we have, about a third of the people who register aren't yet members, so we'd love to have you join us. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization. We encourage informed and active participation in government. We work to increase understanding of major public policy issues and influence public policy through education and advocacy. Sometimes people are confused by this, but when we say nonpartisan, what we mean by that is that we do not support or oppose any political candidate or political party. But we are political. We're not neutral on policy. When you join the League, your dues alone support our grassroots efforts, both locally and at the state and national levels, and this helps us in our mission of empowering voters and defending democracy. If you are not in Piedmont, you can find a local league to join by going to lwvpiedmont.org. The League's efforts in voter education and advocacy are extremely important work, and we greatly appreciate your support, both financially and in volunteer time if you volunteer with us. So now to introduce our guest speaker, I'm going to hand things over to Hope Salzer, who is our Climate Advocacy Director, and she helped put this series together with Jennifer Trainer and volunteers from Piedmont Connect, our local climate advocacy organization. So Hope, it's all yours.
Thank you so much. And as Laurel said, this is our 6th and final event in our 2022 to 23 Climate Speaker Series. And we're here with Professor Jacobson from Stanford, who is the Director of Atmosphere Energy Program and Professor of Civil and Environmental Engineering at Stanford. He's also a Senior Fellow of the Woods Institute for the Environment and the Precourt Institute for Energy. He has earned 2 bachelor's degrees and a master's degree from Stanford, as well as a master's and a doctorate degree from UCLA. He's been a Stanford professor since 1994, publishing 6 textbooks, as well as 175 peer-reviewed journal articles and numerous national and international awards. Maybe I'll just spotlight a couple of them. For example, the 2013 Global Green Policy Design Award for developing state and country energy plans. The 2018, he received the Judy Freeman Lifetime, even though he's not that old, Achievement Award. And in 2019 and 22, he was selected as one of the world's 100 most influential people in climate policy. So we are so thrilled to have him here today with us. And speaking of policy, his work is the scientific basis of the energy portion of the U.S. Green New Deal and laws, both nationally and internationally, to go 100% to renewable energy in cities, states, and countries across the globe. So thank you so much. We're so honored to have you here, Professor Jacobson. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Hope, and also Laurel, for inviting me to come and speak to you all. I'm going to just share my screen and start the presentation. So I'm going to talk about today how to transition states and countries and cities and towns and even individual buildings entirely to clean renewable energy. And there are 3 reasons I've been interested in this. I mean, I've worked my whole career to try to understand and solve large-scale air pollution and climate problems. For me, it's air pollution, energy security, and climate change are 3 problems we need to solve simultaneously. 7 million people die prematurely each year from air pollution worldwide, including 20% of those are children under the age of 5 years old. And this costs the world on the order of $30 trillion per year based on statistical cost of life today. Global warming is expected to cost on the order of $30 trillion per year by 2050. It's already causing significant damage in all forms in terms of wildfires, extreme heat events, more extreme storms, shifts in agriculture, rising sea level, and ocean acidification, increased air pollution due to higher temperatures, more vector-borne diseases, and on and on and on. Fossil fuels are also limited resources. They will run out eventually, and this will result in social, economic, and political instability if we don't have a replacement in place. There are other types of energy insecurity issues as well, including the fact that some countries have control of the energy of other countries, and this leads to conflict, as we can see now in Europe. So these are 3 major problems that I'm trying to address, and I have been trying to address, and they require drastic and immediate solutions. And when I say drastic and immediate, we need to solve 80% of the problem within 7 years and 100% within 13 to about 25 to 28 years in order to avoid 1.5 degrees global warming. And of course, if we want to eliminate millions of deaths each year, we have to stop this problem tomorrow. So our idea in terms of solution is to electrify everything and provide the electricity with clean renewable energy. So for example, transportation, we'd go to battery electric vehicles and some hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles for long distance heavy transport. For building, heating, and cooling, we'd go to electric heat pumps. Electric heat pumps use like 1/4 the energy of natural gas heaters. And because they just move heat around, they don't actually produce it. So they're very efficient, and they run in reverse as air conditioners. You can use them for water heating as well. And heat pumps can be used either in individual buildings or in district heating systems, where district heating is when you have centralized heaters, like centralized water tanks, cold water and hot water tanks, and then you pipe around hot and cold water around a city to provide heating and cooling to the individual buildings, so you don't have to have individual heating and cooling units in the buildings. You can also, in addition to using heat pumps to provide heating and cooling for district heating or individual building heating. You can use geothermal heat or solar heat as well. For industry, we would go to electric arc furnaces, induction furnaces, resistance furnaces, dielectric heaters, electron beam heaters for high temperature industrial processes. And also, in fact, heat pumps for low temperature industrial processes. So all these devices that I've mentioned, except for the geothermal and solar direct heat, are powered by electricity, and the electricity would come from wind, water, and solar. So onshore and offshore wind, solar photovoltaics on rooftops and in power plants, concentrated solar power, geothermal electricity, in addition to geothermal heat, hydroelectricity, and small amounts of tidal and wave power. Of course, the wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine, so we need storage. But we also need, in addition to electricity storage, we need some cold storage and hot storage. But we have lots of electricity storage options today. There's concentrated solar power with storage. There's pumped hydroelectric power storage. There's existing hydroelectric dam storage. There are batteries, flywheels, compressed air storage, gravitational storage with solid masses, and hydrogen fuel cells used for grid electricity is another possibility. I mean, these are all existing technologies, and existing hydroelectric dams are by far the largest source of electricity storage in the world today. And then we also have pumped hydro storage, and batteries are making a big inroad as well. For heating and cooling, well, there's water tank storage, not only in district heating and cooling systems, where you have cold water tanks and hot water tanks, but in your own home, most people have hot water heaters. Then there's ice storage, I'll show you in a minute. And then there's underground storage in boreholes, water pits, and aquifers. And you can actually store heat underground in the soil for up to 6 months if you have insulation around it. So that's a long-term energy storage. And then building materials in your own home, you can store heat in the materials, such as in concrete. And then we'll also have other types of hydrogen, non-grid hydrogen, that we can store store energy in. Now, you probably heard a lot about hydrogen. And so I just want to say what's my opinion about what are the good and bad sources and uses of hydrogen. Well, the only good source of hydrogen is what we call green hydrogen, which is where the hydrogen is produced from electricity. And that electricity comes from either wind, water, or solar power. What's not good are gray or blue hydrogen, which both come from natural gas. Gray hydrogen is natural gas without carbon capture. Blue hydrogen is with carbon capture. And I'll discuss why carbon capture is bad in a little bit. We don't want black or brown hydrogen, which comes from coal, or pink hydrogen, which is nuclear electricity, or turquoise hydrogen, which also comes from natural gas. In terms of uses, the main uses of hydrogen will be long distance aircraft, ships, trains, trucks, military vehicles using fuel cells, because fuel cells regenerate electricity. So these are all electric vehicles, but running on hydrogen as the storage instead of batteries. So long distance ships and aircraft, for example, are more efficient. For short distance aircraft and ships, batteries are more efficient. And in fact, all passenger vehicles, batteries are more efficient. There's just, when you get to longer distances, hydrogen eventually overtakes batteries in efficiency, because you need to carry so many batteries, you end up spending a lot of your energy just carrying around the batteries. So, well, another application of hydrogen is ammonia production. I mean, ammonia already requires hydrogen to be produced, but almost all hydrogen for ammonia today is produced from natural gas. And then steel manufacturing, instead of using coal to convert iron oxide to iron in steel manufacturing, we can use hydrogen. And that in the whole process, and if you use clean renewable electricity for high temperature processes, you can eliminate about 98% of all carbon emissions from steel manufacturing. So that's a good use of hydrogen. Remote microgrids, so those are isolated grids far away, usually for small communities. You can use hydrogen fuel cells for electricity and heat, and that's a good use of hydrogen, but probably you'll actually want to combine that with batteries. So combination of batteries and hydrogen fuel cells for remote microgrids. For grid electricity, it's better to use batteries in most cases. In some cases, you could combine batteries with some hydrogen fuel cells. It's never better to use hydrogen fuel cells and not batteries for grid electricity. But so the bad uses of hydrogen are passenger vehicles, battery electric vehicles are much better. To heat buildings, that's just completely inefficient. Much better use electric heat pumps. For burning the hydrogen, we'd rather use fuel cells to eliminate the pollution. And for most grid electricity cases, we'd rather just use batteries for storage rather than hydrogen fuel cells. Okay, but why not? Well, you probably heard about other proposals to use carbon capture, direct air capture, small modular nuclear reactors, bioenergy, non-hydrogen electrofuels, geoengineering. These are all what are components of what are called the all of the above policy, which pretty much all administrations have been pushing these technologies in addition to wind, water, and solar. But I want to point out that these are all what I call greenwashing technologies. Most of them are designed just to lengthen the life of the fossil fuel industry, specifically carbon capture, direct air capture, non-hydrogen electrofuels, and geoengineering, and blue hydrogen, which was on the last list, are all designed to lengthen the life of fossil fuels. So really briefly, what's the problem with these technologies? Well, carbon capture, first of all, it takes carbon dioxide out of the exhaust stream of, let's say, a power plant, whereas direct air capture takes carbon dioxide directly from the air. In both cases, they don't remove any other chemical except for carbon dioxide. They don't remove any air pollution from a fossil fuel plant or from the air. And they don't eliminate any mining of fossil fuels. Instead, they increase mining and air pollution, and in fact, they increase carbon dioxide because they all need energy to run. Carbon capture, for example, when you add carbon capture to a coal plant, 30% of the electricity from the coal plant is needed to run the carbon capture equipment. Or conversely, if you want to get the same electricity output from the coal plant as before, you need 30% more coal to run the carbon capture equipment. So that means 30% more air pollution, 30% more mining of coal, and you just keep the coal infrastructure alive and it lasts longer. In addition, when the carbon is captured, 75% of all carbon dioxide captured today worldwide is used for what's called enhanced oil recovery. And this is where they pipe the carbon dioxide to a nearby oil field so the carbon dioxide can bind with the oil, make it less dense, and then rise faster to the surface. During that process, 40% of the carbon dioxide that was captured gets released immediately back to the air. And then you have more oil that's burned, and so you get more air pollution, more carbon dioxide. So when you actually look at there was only one coal plant in the US that had carbon capture equipment. It was in Texas. And the data indicated they actually didn't take the electricity from the coal plant to run the carbon capture. They actually built a natural gas plant just to run the carbon capture equipment for the coal plant. This is how insane this whole thing is. So they had more natural gas mining, the natural gas combustion, air pollution, nothing was captured from the natural gas plant. None of the upstream coal mining carbon or pollution was captured. So in the end, before you even accounted for what happened to the carbon dioxide after it was captured, it captured only 11 to 20% of the carbon dioxide, but it increased air pollution, it increased mining. And even of that 11 to 20%, as I mentioned, that all went to enhanced oil recovery. So 40% of that went right back to the air. So you're left with about 7 to 12% capture rate. It cost $1 billion. And who pays for that? Well, it's the ratepayers, and it's mostly in terms of the fraction of their income. People who pay the highest fraction of their income for electricity are low-income ratepayers. So that's who footed the bill. This was basically a regressive tax on ratepayers. And this plant shut down after 3 years because it was so inefficient. And so then the ratepayers still have to pay this high amount. So even though this was supposed to be the best plant in the world, it was a total failure. And instead of realizing that the best way to address climate is to actually stop emissions, through the federal government today, through the Inflation Reduction Act, is now subsidizing carbon capture even more. And all this is doing is it's increasing CO2 in the air, because imagine if you use renewable energy to run the carbon capture equipment. Well, then if you use renewable energy, again, you're not reducing any air pollution, any mining, and you're only reducing some CO2. But if you use that same renewable energy just to replace the coal plant in the first place, or a coal plant or gas plant, you actually reduce more CO2 doing that than the carbon capture equipment will reduce with the same amount of electricity from the wind, let's say. And you reduce the air pollution, and you reduce the mining, and you reduce the fossil fuel infrastructure lifetime. So in fact, this is the same with direct air capture, same thing. It requires energy. It's much better, even if it's renewable energy, it's much better to use that renewable energy to replace a fossil fuel plant. In fact, there's never any case you can find that carbon capture or direct air capture has any benefit whatsoever to anybody but fossil fuel companies who are reaping subsidies off of them. And blue hydrogen is hydrogen from natural gas where carbon capture is added. So again, we have the same problem. So whenever you hear carbon capture, direct air capture, or blue hydrogen, just turn your head and just these are scam technologies. They do not do anything for climate, air pollution, or eliminating fossil fuels. Bioenergy, the problem with that is that you still burn fuels, you still have air pollution. It takes a lot of energy to produce and cultivate and process the bioenergy. And in the end, you have very little reduction of carbon. You have air pollution, just like with fossil fuels, and you use a lot of land. Just to give you an example, an electric vehicle powered by solar photovoltaics, well, solar photovoltaics are about 20% efficient. Photosynthesis is only 1% efficient. So you get 20 times more energy by putting solar panels on farmland than you do using the farmland for energy crops. Plus, an electric vehicle is 4 times the efficiency, or 4 times the efficiency as a gasoline vehicle. So you get using solar photovoltaics in an electric vehicle, you can go 80 times further for the same amount of land as using ethanol, corn ethanol, for a combustion engine vehicle. So it's just mindlessly inefficient to use bioenergy instead of solar, for example, in electric vehicles. Plus, you have air pollution, you have water issues. Small modular nuclear reactors, these are not much different than large reactors, except they're smaller. Large reactors now are taking in liberalized markets between 17 and 21 years between planning and operation. The only reactors in the US that are being built are in Georgia, and they're just starting to be tested now, and they're in year 17 to 18 for these 2 reactors. They cost $34 billion for 2.2 gigawatts. It's about $15.2 per watt, which compares to $1 per watt for wind or solar today. So the capital cost is 15 times higher for new nuclear. The energy cost over time, what's called the levelized cost of energy, is about 8 times that of new wind or solar. So you have to, and new wind or solar only takes 1 to 3 years between planning and operation. So you have to wait on the order of 15 years longer to pay for something that's 8 times more. And we need to solve 80% of the problem in 7 years. And you can't if you have a technology that won't even be ready until around 2038, if you plan it today. And that's not even accounting for the weapons proliferation issue associated with nuclear, the meltdown risk, the underground uranium mining.
We lost your audio.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yep. Now you're back. Yep.
Okay. Anyway, so you have all these additional issues with large reactors. Small reactors, well, the cost issue is still there. It might even be more expensive because with large reactors, you have what's called economies of scale. Small ones, they're not even proposed to be ready till about 2030 or so for just testing purposes. You still have delays. You still have weapons proliferation issues. You still have waste issues. And you still have meltdown risk. We don't know what's going to happen with these reactors because their designs are not public. And so it's all a big mystery. But we do know that they're not going to be much different from conventional reactors. Anyway, let me move on. There are other problems with these other technologies as well. Let me give you an example of some technologies. This is Stanford, where I work, actually used to have a natural gas cogeneration plant that would provide 80% of the campus electricity and heat. In 2016, that was bulldozed and replaced with this 4th generation district heating and cooling system, which is, so there are two cold water tanks and a hot water tank, and there are about 35 to 40 miles of cold water pipes and hot water pipes around the university. And the cold water goes to cool buildings and hot water goes to heat buildings. And heat pumps are used to raise the temperature of the heat and lower the temperature of the cold. And the electricity for the heat pumps comes from, well, the university bought about 160 megawatts of solar photovoltaics, 2 power plants in the Central Valley, and about 10 megawatts on the rooftops. And so the university is actually now the first campus that's 100% renewable electricity and heating and cooling in the world. And so this is, this type of district heating and cooling is quite useful. It's done quite a bit in Northern Europe and has been for a while. This is a different type of district heating system. This is underground borehole storage. This is in Okotoks, Canada, 2004 and 5, 52 homes were built. On the garages on the top left, you can see solar collectors. During the summer, when the days are long, the solar collectors would collect heat from the sun, and there's a glycol solution in there that collects the heat. The solution is piped to this building on the right, where the heat is transferred to water. The water is then piped under this field where they're U-shaped pipes. And as the water goes down, the heat is transferred to the soil. The heat is stored there for up to 6 months. And in the winter, when it's cold, the whole system runs in reverse. The heat is transferred back to the buildings and provides 100% of the heating for these 52 homes. So this is actually very low cost storage. It's less than $1 a kilowatt hour for heating. Batteries in comparison are about $150 to $200 per kilowatt hour of electricity storage. Here's another district heating storage system. This is called water pit storage. Very similar. They have this big swimming pool, basically, filled with water, covered with insulation. During the summer, the solar collectors will collect heat. Heat gets sent to the pool. The water is heated up to 80 degrees Celsius, stored till winter time. And then in winter, the heated water provides most of the heat for this village of around 2,300 homes. Here's another district cooling system. This is ice storage. Actually, Stanford used to have a big ice cube like this under a building. And at night, when electricity price was low, the electricity was used to produce ice. And then during the day, instead of paying high electricity prices for air conditioning in the afternoon, they'd run water through the coils in the ice, and water get piped to the buildings and cool the buildings. And so this was like electricity storage, but a lot cheaper. Okay, so what about individual homes? So I'm going to talk about how you can electrify your home. There are now ordinances in many cities requiring, getting rid of gas in homes, new construction homes in particular. Well, in 2017, I built a new home that has no gas on the property, and it's all solar and batteries and electric appliances and machines. I just want to give you an idea of what's going on. So there's about 13.6 kilowatts of solar on the roof. There are 4 Tesla wall mount batteries. So during the day, when the sun comes up, well, it's the solar photovoltaic electricity is used for electrical appliances in the home. And when those are satisfied, then the excess electricity goes to the batteries. When the batteries are full, the excess electricity goes back to the grid, and I sell electricity to the grid. So I have electric cars, but they're electric heat pumps. This is called a ductless mini split heat pump air conditioner unit. So they're, for each of these outside units on the right, it's just basically a fan. Well, there's inside and outside units. There's no ducts, which are those big vents or big pipes that you send heat through. Instead, the only thing connecting these inside units, which on the left, each major room of the home has one of these inside units, that they're connected to this. Well, there are about 6 of those inside units connected to one of these fans on the outside through little tubes that contain coolant. And basically, heat is transferred from the outside to the inside when you need heat, or heat is transferred from the inside to the outside when you need to cool down the room. Because it's only transferring heat or cold, it uses much less energy than natural gas. It uses 1/4 the energy. They're very efficient, hardly uses any energy, and it runs 24/7. And even on the hottest day of the year, the temperature stays really nice in the home. very efficient. For water heating, same thing, use a heat pump water heater, uses 1/4 the energy as a gas water heater. And you don't need gas pipes. Save money on gas pipes. You don't need a gas permitting or anything related to gas. For cooking, an electric induction cooktop. It boils water in half the time as gas. It cooks really evenly, and it works really efficiently. Over 5 years of energy use, first 5 years, I generated 120% of all my home and vehicle energy needs. So I sent the remaining 20% back to the grid. I had no electric bill, natural gas bill, or gasoline bill during the 5 years, and received an average of $860 per year back from Silicon Valley Clean Energy, which was the community choice aggregation utility that I subscribe to that takes over the generation portion of the bill from PG&E. PG&E still does the transmission distribution, but they don't. That's all included in here. So there's no bills. I'm just getting paid, and I avoided a gas hookup fee of about $6,000. I'm showing a range here of typical homes. I avoided gas pipes of about $10,000, and I avoided these electric bill, gasoline bill, natural gas bill. So there's a savings, upfront savings, and a yearly savings. So the payback time, and there's subsidies as well for this, but without subsidies, a 10-year payback time, and with subsidies, it's about 5 years. So it's already paid itself off, the solar and the battery system. And so the solar is warranted for 25 years. So the system is basically free for the next 20 years. And this is just, even without subsidies, this is a no-brainer. Every new home should have this. And when you can, if you need to change your water heater, for example, get a heat pump water heater. Even if your dryer breaks down, get a heat pump dryer. Heat pumps are just amazing. LED lights in your home. Get an electric induction cooktop the next time you need a stove. Electric cars. These are all really energy efficient, and they save a huge amount of money over time. So this is the hottest day of the year in 2020, September 6th. It shows the green is the solar production on that day. When you have a hot summer day, of course, there's a lot of sunlight, and so there's a lot of sunlight. And I kept the inside temperature at 77 degrees, and the blue on the right is the electricity use. The blue during the day came directly from the solar, but after the sun went down, that blue is from the batteries. And then when the batteries ran out, then I used grid electricity. However, you can see on the right, I produced about 60 kilowatt hours that day of electricity, and I consumed 45. So I sent an extra 15 kilowatt hours back to the grid. So even on the hottest day of the year, I was helping the grid out. And if every year most homes had solar on the roof, they could actually help the grid and avoid blackouts. We wouldn't have blackouts in California if most people had rooftop solar. In fact, in the summer, the electricity use in the summer in California is up to twice as much as any other season. It's twice as high. So the peak electricity demand in California is twice as high in summer than the peak in any other season. So this is why in California, having a lot of solar can really help to avoid these blackouts. But in addition, offshore wind can help too, because offshore wind, once the sun goes down, offshore wind actually peaks in the late afternoon, early evening. Plus, it peaks in summer. So this is another reason to go to offshore wind. Okay, next step is, can we transition the whole world to 100% clean renewable energy and storage? So we did plans for 145 countries. I'm going to go a little faster now because I'm running out of time. And we did plans for each of 145 countries. In 2018, the end-use demand for all purposes in these countries was 13 trillion watts or terawatts. That's expected to go up to 20.4 terawatts in 2050. But if we electrify all energy and provide the electricity with wind, water, solar, that's expected to go down 56% to about 9 terawatts for 5 reasons. One is that battery electric and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles are much more efficient than internal combustion engine vehicles. Electrified industry is more efficient than combustion industry. Heat pumps are more efficient than gas or oil heating. And then about 11.3% of all energy worldwide is used to mine, transport, and refine fossil fuels and uranium. And we no longer will need to do that. So we eliminate that energy. And then we can squeeze an additional 6 or 7% energy efficiency improvements beyond business as usual. So that adds up to 56% reduction. So this shows the same thing. It shows from 2020 to 2050 how if we don't do anything under the BAU or business as usual case, energy demand will go up to 20.4 terawatts. But if we electrify and provide the electricity with wind, water, solar, we go down those 5 shades of colors to the 100% wind, water, solar line of 8.9 terawatts. And then we provide that wind, water, solar with onshore and offshore wind, et cetera. This shows a transition of 80% by 2030 and 100% by 2050. Of course, if we can get 80% by 2030, there's really no reason we can't accelerate the transition to get 100% by 2035. That's what this chart shows, with the same endpoint in 2050. And so this is really what we need, is a large-scale transition that's rapid and efficient and saves lives, saves the climate, and saves people money and creates jobs at the same time. Here's like a mix. Okay, so we developed plans for 145 countries. Then in the US, we did plans for all 50 states. And so I'm showing California and the US as well here. It's mostly going to be wind and solar, combination of wind and solar for all the plans. There's small amounts of all the hydroelectric we have already exists, so that there's no growth of hydroelectric power here. And geothermal is going to be small, but we'll have a lot of onshore wind, offshore wind, and rooftop PV and utility scale PV primarily. How much land will this take up? Well, we don't need new land for offshore wind or tidal or wave power. We don't need new land for rooftop PV. We're not adding any new hydro. Geothermal is pretty small. So most of the new land is utility PV plus CSP, which we call footprint, because that's actually land taken up on the ground. Although with utility PV now, you can actually have canopies, let's say above agricultural land, and grow crops underneath it. So it's not necessarily footprint that you can't use for other purposes. Onshore wind is spacing between wind turbines, and you can use that for sure for agriculture, open space, or even putting solar on it. But in terms of the total land for the 145 countries, we need about 0.36% for the spacing between onshore wind and 0.17% for the PV and CSP. So that's 0.53%. So about 0.5% of world land. For the US, it's about 0.84%. For comparison, the fossil fuel industry occupies 1.3% of the US land area today. So we think we'll actually reduce land requirements by going to wind, water, solar compared to fossil fuels. In the case of fossil fuels, we need to increase land use every year because we need 50,000 new oil and gas wells every year in North America to keep up with our energy demand, because that's what's being built right now. And plus, we're getting more and more pipelines put in, more storage facilities. So fossil fuel land consumption is in steady state, grows every year, whereas wind, water, solar stays relatively constant, only grows proportional to population. So it's a lot, in the long run, it's a lot less land area for wind, water, and solar. We think we can keep the grid stable. We did grid stability studies for the whole world, including California. Just shows a period over 2-year period, how we can keep the grid stable every 30 seconds for 2 years. I'm going to skip through that. What are the costs of energy? Well, the capital cost of keeping the grid stable worldwide is about $62 trillion. So that's a worldwide Green New Deal capital cost. In the US, it's about $9 trillion. In China, about $13 trillion. California, about half a trillion dollars. So $500 billion. But what's more important is the annual energy costs and comparison. So with business as usual, today worldwide, it costs about $11 trillion per year. That's expected to go up to $18 trillion per year by 2050. Health costs are another $33 trillion per year, and climate costs another $32 trillion per year in 2050, for a total social cost of $83 trillion per year. If we go to wind, water, solar, we eliminate the health and climate costs. Our energy costs go down about 63%. That's because we reduce our energy requirements 56%, and the cost per unit energy another 15%. So 63% reduction in the energy cost, 92% reduction in what's called the social cost of energy by going to wind, water, and solar. Finally, some policies. So we started developing energy plans in 2009. This was our first plan. It was in Scientific American about just seeing if it was possible technically and economically to power the whole world with wind, water, and solar, not looking at individual countries. And the conclusion at the time was, yes, it's technically and economically possible by 2030, but for social and political reasons, a complete transition is more practical by 2050, but with most or 80% by 2030. Little did we know that this would be the scientific basis for the Green New Deal. And although it hasn't been voted on at the federal level, a lot of laws and policies worldwide have been put in place to go to 100% renewables, at least in the electric power sector. There are 62 countries committed to 100% renewable electricity in the electric power sector. There's only one, Denmark, that has committed to transition all energy sectors to 100% renewable. But these countries represent a small fraction of world emissions. I mean, China alone is on the order of 30% of all world emissions, and the next 10 countries, including the U.S., are another third. So there are almost 200 countries in the world, and those 200 countries, well, about 185 of those countries represents about 1/3 of all emissions. But there are 400 companies committed to 100% renewables, including 8 of the 10 biggest companies in the world, the ones in blue. There are 19 states and territories and districts that have committed to 100% in the US by different years, as you can see here. And these are in the electric power sector. And there are around 180 cities in the US and over 400 worldwide that have committed to 100% renewables. The ones in blue are just large cities, and the ones in red are smaller cities. And there are actually those 16 countries and states that are near or at 100% of either their annual electricity generated or consumed from wind, water, solar. So on the left, those 9 countries are generating 100% of all their electricity from wind, water, and solar, mostly hydro. I mean, H means hydro is the largest source in all those countries, but also either geothermal or wind or some solar cases. In the middle column, Kenya, Tajikistan, and Namibia, they're generating over 91% of their electricity from wind, water, solar. Kenya's actually, its major source is geothermal. On the right, these are states or countries, or in the case of Scotland, that are around 100% or more of the electricity they consume is from wind, water, solar. South Dakota, for example, it's at 126% of all the electricity that it consumes, it's 120% of the electricity that it consumes is from wind, water, solar. It's 77% wind, and then the rest hydropower. And so it actually produces more than it consumes, and it also produces fossil fuels. So it exports the rest to other states. Washington State's at about 98%, and Scotland's about 91%, and Montana's about 91% as well. Okay, so to summarize, didn't talk about jobs in detail, but our plans would find that we find that we'd create 28 million more long-term full-time jobs than lost worldwide. We'd require about 0.53% of the world's land for footprint and spacing. We could avoid 7 million air pollution deaths per year. We'd slow, then reverse global warming. We think we can keep the grid stable throughout the world with 100%. Absolute energy costs are 63% lower, and energy plus health plus climate costs are 92% lower than with fossil fuels. And finally, if you want more information, I just published a book called No Miracles Needed. That's it's kind of a layman's book on basically what I talked about, but how to go to 100% renewables around the world. And our individual plans are for states and countries and cities and towns are available at that website. The second site, there's an online course on 100% wind, water, solar that's based on a book like the one I just mentioned. That and also there are infographic maps if you just want to click on a state or a country to find a plan for that state or country. That's easy to find. So with that, I'm happy to try to answer any questions you might have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This was great, and a ton of information.
Right.
Are you here? You want me to? Here we go. So we do have a bunch of questions. We'll get through as many as we can. Reminder to people, if you want to ask some questions, I don't know that we're going to get through all of them, but feel free to put them in the Q&A. So first question, it seems like the existing electrical grid system can't handle the current load. How will that system be able to handle more support going to 100% electric?
Well, yeah, we do need to expand transmission distribution. Excuse me. So if we think about it, we're going to be electrifying everything, but we're going to be reducing our energy requirements significantly. So think about it this way. If we have 100 units of energy today for all purposes, electricity is about 20% of all energy right now. If we think of the four sectors, electricity, transportation, buildings, and industry, electricity is about 20% of all energy. So if we use 100 units of energy today, electricity is using 20 units. So if we go down, let's say we go down 60% of our energy requirements go down 60%. So then we need 40 units, but all those 40 units will be electricity. So we'll double our electricity requirements, but reduce our total energy requirements by 60%. So how do we meet that double electricity requirement? Well, first of all, a lot more people have solar on the roofs, and so we don't need more grids for that. So that'll help. But we do otherwise need to build out the grid more. But a lot of this local transmission distribution, we do need some long distance transmission distribution. So it is something that we need to do. Storage is going to help. So I'm not going to say it's easy, but that's just something that's necessary, and the benefits are so much greater than the cost though.
If you talk to Silicon Valley tech people about direct air capture, they seem primarily interested in that. What do they say about it?
Well, yeah, a lot of people, entrepreneurs are definitely interested because there are a lot of subsidies available, and the fossil fuel industry will pay a lot for it.
Are they just blind to the fact that it's sort of a scam?
It's a scam. It's not. It won't help anything. It's not going to help our climate or air pollution. It'll make problems worse. I can guarantee that.
So are the tech companies just, they're putting profits over?
Yeah, they might believe that they're doing something, but they just haven't looked at the whole picture.
Okay.
Because if you just look at if all you do is focus on CO2, and you think, okay, yeah, I'm taking CO2 out of the air, and now I have a bunch of CO2, I must be doing something good. But you're not looking at the energy you consumed and what that energy could have, if it was renewable energy, especially, what you could have done with that renewable energy that was more efficient. And you could have replaced, because if you're using solar photovoltaic electricity to run direct air capture, that solar is not replacing coal on the grid. It's not that coal, now you need more coal on the grid.
Mm-hmm.
Some people will argue, well, okay, what about when we get rid of all fossil fuels? Then there's a little bit better argument for direct air capture once all fossil fuels are gone. But first of all, we're we're not a long way from that, so it's not even an issue today. But second, even at that point, there's still lower hanging fruit, like reducing biomass burning, reducing methane from landfills and manure and digestive tracts of sheep and cattle, reducing nitrous oxide emissions, reducing halogens. Those are all actually easier than direct air capture.
Sort of related to this is, how do you think this information that you were talking about today can or should make its way to the wider community? Like, it seems like the vast majority of people don't know what you're telling us. How can we help bridge that gap?
Well, I mean, yeah, information is the key here. It's always been information. Most people are not aware of what's possible, and a lot of this stuff there are a lot of interactions going on, and so it does take time to figure it out. And it's very easy for these industries to, greenwash or to cover up what's really going on, or just to ignore the other pitfalls. So educating others, spreading the information like these, this type of talk, or just word of mouth. I guess I'm not trying to push this book, but that's the purpose of writing this book. No Miracles Needed is trying to write something general so that people can, get it all in one place. Well, because a lot of everything I'm talking about today is in there. It's described in detail of why those technologies are not useful. So that kind of thing helps. But it's impossible for any one of us to reach millions and millions and millions of people. There are billions of people on this planet. So it's just kind of a slow osmosis of information over time, I think.
Well, I hope we're doing our little part here today.
No, it's great. It's very helpful.
How are we doing at developing the workforce that we will need to transition to renewable energy?
Yeah, that's also a challenge, because a lot of people lose their jobs. We'll gain more jobs than we lose, but we do need to retrain people for these other jobs. And the places where the new jobs may be different from those places where the jobs we no longer need are. So I mean, we do need help at the federal level in terms of jobs at the state level. And that's one good thing I think about the Inflation Reduction Act. It is helping transition workers. I can't say advocate for that very much because I don't know exactly all the details, but I've seen some good things that it's doing. Like it's trying to replace some coal mines, put solar photovoltaics on some of these locations. But that's definitely something we need to do. Make sure that people are not left behind, and that it's a just transition as well. So it's there is a lot of social work to do to make sure this is done fairly, and also so most people are benefiting, and it's not just causing a lot of pain and suffering.
You talked a little bit about hydrogen, and you referred to blue hydrogen. So we have one question: why is pink hydrogen bad?
Well, pink hydrogen is from nuclear electricity, and well, first of all, new nuclear is just non-existent basically in liberalized markets, and well, even worldwide, I mean, there's less nuclear electricity output today than in 2006 worldwide. So there's no growth in nuclear. So nuclear is used for baseload right now. Which, okay, if it's existing nuclear and it's used, it should be used for baseload. So if you start using it for hydrogen production, you would not want to do that. You would rather use intermittent wind, where let's say you have too much wind at a given time or too much solar and you don't know what to do with it because the grid's already saturated with electricity. It's better to use that to produce hydrogen. Why would you take baseload electricity from nuclear to produce hydrogen? That would just make it more difficult to balance loads on the grid. And some people have these schemes that they want to build new nuclear reactors just to produce hydrogen. Again, it takes so long to build a nuclear reactor and it's so expensive that's just, wishful thinking. That's just a way for people to get investment money to park it for a long time. And then when they're halfway through the project and it's delayed, they can just ask for more money. That's kind of how it generally works with nuclear. So it's just from an economic sense, it doesn't make sense. And from a practical sense, it's just not very efficient use of electricity.
Is feeding seaweed to cows an actual solution to reducing methane produced by dairy cows? And can it be produced on a large scale?
Well, yeah, I've seen studies that show that seaweed may reduce methane. I just don't know the scale and how much energy is going to produce the seaweed too, because seaweed used for biofuels is not very efficient because you need lots of water space, because photosynthesis, you can't just put them in columns. The sunlight doesn't penetrate deep into a column. So you have to spread it out to grow. And I don't know, I just don't know the numbers, how much you need, how much energy is required. If it were just there free and you can take it and it doesn't take much to get it to the cows, sure, that's fine. But I'm kind of skeptical that you can do this on a large scale.
We should repurpose the seaweed heading toward Florida.
Yeah.
How feasible is solar geoengineering as a tool for controlling climate change?
Well, again, that's one technology that doesn't solve any problem whatsoever. All it does is mask the problem of global warming. So it allows fossil fuels to continue, air pollution to continue, and in fact allows it to grow because people become complacent, thinking, oh, we're solving the problem with reflecting some sunlight back to space. And so keep in mind that the problem is burning things. We need to stop the burning. If we just mask the problem, then that just allows the problem to continue. And temperature is only one aspect of climate change. I mean, first of all, if you put particles in the stratosphere, you're going to reduce sunlight to the surface. Well, of course, that's going to reduce photosynthesis, and that's going to destroy a bunch of crops as well. So there's side effects there. Whatever comes up eventually comes down. That pollution eventually descends back to the surface. And if let's say you put these particles in the stratosphere and you do cool the surface, then you have to keep doing this forever because fossil fuels are going to keep growing underneath it. And if you stopped putting these particles in, let's say there's an international conflict or something like that, then all of a sudden you're going to all the warming is going to be realized because you stopped this cooling. We need to stop the problem, not mask it. That's the key.
We have a couple more minutes. I'll try to get through one or two more questions. I don't know if you're familiar with Bjorn Lomborg's book, False Alarm, but we have a question. Can you comment on the premise of it? And then they're apparently they lay out 5 solutions: carbon tax, green innovation, adaptation, geoengineering, and prosperity. But I'm not exactly sure what the prosperity is referring to.
Well, I haven't read his book, but I
Okay.
kind of know his
Work.
ilk. So, I mean, well, none of those is a solution. I mean, carbon taxes, I mean, the best policies are renewable portfolio standards, where we have certain percentages of renewables each year, increasingly, and we get to 100% by some year, and not only for the electric power sector, but also in the transportation sectors and in this industrial sector and buildings. Carbon tax, I mean, industries can pay the tax and still pollute. And it doesn't solve that problem, and it doesn't address air pollution. A renewable portfolio standard reduces air pollution as well because it gets rid of combustion sources. And so you can then use these scam technologies with a carbon tax, like carbon capture, direct air capture, blue hydrogen. In fact, they are using them right now, those scam technologies, to evade any real action. So carbon taxes, while they have good intentions, they're really not addressing all 3 of these problems. They're not addressing the energy security problem either, not addressing air pollution at all, and there's no evidence they actually help a lot with the carbon problem. And the geoengineering I already mentioned. It's just completely useless for solving a problem. It's just masking it. And what were the other ones?
Green innovation, which I feel like you've talked about that. I mean, that's pretty broad.
Well, I have a feeling that means, that can mean anything, like carbon capture, can mean electrofuels, which are the same thing. They're basically, electrofuels, by the way, are taking carbon dioxide that's from carbon capture, then creating a new fuel to replace gasoline. So you already have one efficiency, carbon capture, and then it takes a lot of energy to take carbon dioxide, and you have to get other chemicals together to replace gasoline. So that's a lot of energy that gets burned or used, and then that replacement is then burned like gasoline, so you still have air pollution. So that's completely useless of application of carbon dioxide. So there's actually, there are really only 2 applications of carbon dioxide that it is captured. One is enhanced oil recovery, and the second is these electrofuels. I mean, there's soda water in addition, but we're pretty much saturated with soda water, carbon dioxide. So there's really no use of the carbon dioxide that's actually helpful for reducing pollution and climate problems.
One final question, then we'll wrap up. What local policies can we advocate for within our city councils or county governments that could have the most positive effect on moving towards zero emissions?
Well, right now I go to getting rid of gas in buildings, so making all electric new buildings. And so a lot of communities are doing that. So, I think, in fact, there's a new law. The California Resources Board just passed a new law, or it was the Bay Area Quality Management District just passed a new law that requires no NOx emissions from any household heating. So that means air heaters and water heaters have to be zero emissions. The only way to do that is a heat pump. So doing that, and then like Menlo Park, for example, passed an ordinance for all new buildings have to have no natural gas. And I think even existing buildings, I don't know if this one has been voted on yet or not, but existing buildings, you'd have to take natural gas out of it. So trying to get rid of fossil fuels in buildings, electrify cars as much as possible, at least have your city go all 100% renewable, 100% renewable cities. Those are local things. And then in your own home, I mean, weather stripping, energy efficient appliances, LED lights. I'm sure everybody here is doing a lot already. So it's really, that's great. But I mean, we can always do more. And I think we can do things at our community level or individual level, and then of course at the state and national levels as well.
All right, thank you so much. We are out of time, so I want to wrap us up. I really appreciate all of the thoughtful questions, all of the information packed into this presentation. I personally learned a ton. I am very grateful to our guest, Dr. Mark Jacobson, for taking the time to be with us today and for sharing your immense expertise. Thank you so much. I also want to thank Hope Salzer and Jennifer Trainer from LWV Piedmont and Connie Herrick, who is from Piedmont Connect, for putting this whole climate series together. As I said before, all of the recordings of our past events, including this one, are available on our YouTube channel. And if you are watching on YouTube, please consider subscribing to our channel for easy access to future events. And if you scan the QR code in the corner here, you can join us on Outreach Circle to get election updates. And also, please, if you haven't already, join your local League of Women Voters. This officially ends our program. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.